Stop scrolling. Look at what you're seeing. That is not Africa. That is not a wildlife sanctuary. That is not a nature documentary filmed on another continent. That is Colombia, right now in 2024. And every single one of those animals belongs to a dead man. A man who was shot through the head on a rooftop in Medellín 30 years ago. A man who flooded the United States with cocaine for 2 straight decades. A man so powerful, so untouchable, so completely consumed by his own obsession that even death couldn't clean up the mess he left behind. His name was Pablo Escobar. And before the world knew him as the most wanted criminal in human history, he built something the world had never seen. A private zoo in the Colombian jungle, funded entirely by cocaine, stocked with animals from 6 continents, cost $100 million. Then, he died, and nobody, not the government, not the military, not a single person on Earth, had a plan for what came next. Pablo Escobar is 32 years old. He controls 80% of the world's cocaine supply. He makes $420 million per week, not per year, per week. His accountants estimate rats consume $1 billion of his stored cash annually. He lists it as a routine operating expense and moves on. Money has stopped meaning anything to Pablo Escobar. He has more of it than any criminal in recorded history, more than he can spend, more than he can count, more than he can hide. What he wants now is something no amount of money has ever actually bought anyone. He wants to be extraordinary. He wants to be remembered. He wants something that screams to the entire world, "I was here, and I was unlike anything that came before me." He purchases 5,000 hectares of prime Colombian jungle in the Antioquia region, 200 kilometers from Medellín, 3 times the size of New York's Central Park, and he names it Hacienda Napoles. Then he picks up the phone and calls Africa. The first animals arrive by boat, 4 hippos, 1 male, 3 females. Pablo names every one of them personally. He feeds them from his own hands. He stands in the water beside them. He lets his children ride on their backs like living boats in a swimming pool that costs more than most people earn in a lifetime. Then come 9 giraffes, 15 zebras, ostriches, flamingos, exotic birds from every corner of the earth. Over 200 species in total. Hacienda Napoles becomes something that simply should not exist. A Narcos Noah's Ark. A private wildlife sanctuary carved from South American jungle and paid for entirely with cocaine money. But the animals are only the beginning. The estate also contains a private airstrip used not for family holidays, but for drug shipments moving north toward the United States. A full bullfighting ring where Pablo entertains guests every Sunday. A collection of 200 vintage and antique automobiles, many of which he orders buried underground as what he calls future treasures for a future he is completely certain he will have. And at the main entrance gate, enormous hand-sculpted concrete dinosaurs, because Pablo Escobar wanted one, and nobody on earth was going to tell him no. Miss Colombia visits and smiles for photographs. Politicians arrive for weekend parties and leave with suitcases that weren't theirs when they arrived. Journalists photograph the animals and write enchanted features about Colombia's most extraordinary private estate. For one brief, surreal, completely impossible moment in history, Hacienda Napoles is the most spectacular place on the surface of the earth. Pablo Escobar is not a drug lord. He is a king, and this is his kingdom, and he fully intends to rule it forever. December 2nd, 1993. Pablo Escobar is shot dead. 1 bullet behind the right ear on the rooftop of a house in Los Olivos, Medellín, Colombia. His empire, $30 billion, 40,000 employees, a private army, politicians across 3 governments, collapses within 24 hours. The Colombian government moves immediately. Everything is seized. The cash is looted. The cars are taken apart and sold in pieces. The mansion is stripped so completely that only the walls remain. And then, complete silence. Nobody thought about the animals. In the absolute chaos of dismantling the most powerful criminal organization in Colombian history, in the rush to arrest cartel members, freeze bank accounts, process evidence, and divide Pablo's assets among competing government agencies, nobody wrote a contingency plan for 4 hippopotamuses living in a private lake in the Colombian countryside. Because there is no contingency plan for that. No manual exists, no protocol, no international framework, nothing. Most animals eventually leave Hacienda Napoles. The giraffes are transported to Colombian zoos. The zebras follow. The flamingos are captured and rehomed. But the hippos? The hippos have already made their own decision. They find the Magdalena River. The water temperature is perfect. The vegetation along the banks is dense and endless. There are no natural predators anywhere in South America that can threaten a fully grown hippopotamus. There are no Nile crocodiles to compete for territory. There is no one to stop them. And for the first time in their lives, they are completely, totally, and irreversibly free. Pablo Escobar imported 4 hippos to Colombia. Today, wildlife scientists count between 130 and 200, every single one of them a direct descendant of his original 4 animals. By 2035, conservative projections estimate the population will reach 400. By 2050, the number could exceed 1,000. 1,000 wild hippopotamuses loose in South America because a cocaine trafficker in 1981 wanted to build a zoo. The scientific community is not using gentle language about this anymore. Colombian ecologist Dr. Carlos Valderrama states it directly. They are the largest invasive species on Earth. What is happening in Colombia is bigger than anything Australia has ever faced. It is bigger than Burmese pythons in Florida. We have no historical comparison for this. The farmers living along the Magdalena River do not need scientific language to explain it. One farmer puts it simply, they eat everything. They destroy our fields in a single night, and you cannot frighten them. A hippopotamus is afraid of nothing on this earth. In Africa, hippos kill 500 people every single year. They are the deadliest large land mammal on the planet. More people die annually from hippo attacks than from lion attacks, more than crocodiles, more than elephants, more than any other large animal. In Colombia, serious incidents remain relatively rare for now. But the population is doubling every decade, and the Magdalena River flows through some of the most densely populated agricultural land in all of South America. Below the surface, the ecological damage is already severe and accelerating. Native river manatees are being pushed out of their established territories. The chemical composition of the water is shifting as hippo waste fundamentally alters microecosystems. Fish populations in affected river sections are in measurable decline. Species that evolved in complete isolation from hippopotamuses for millions of years are suddenly sharing their habitat with an animal their biology has absolutely no framework for. Meanwhile, the internet has made them celebrities. Cocaine hippos, Pablo's pets, millions of views, hundreds of millions of impressions, merchandise, memes, travel influencers posting selfies from 15 feet away from a 3,000-pound animal with the bite force of a car crusher. The world has collectively decided that Pablo Escobar's hippos are adorable. Wildlife biologists have collectively decided they are watching a catastrophe develop in real time. Colombia faces a choice with no good options. 3 paths forward.
every single one of them either impossible, catastrophically expensive, or politically unsurvivable. Option 1. Sterilization. Locate every hippo, sedate it, perform surgery in field conditions, release it. Cost per animal, $50,000. Total estimated cost, tens of millions and rising annually. Timeline, multiple decades under perfect conditions. Reality, hippos submerge when sedated by DART. They sink. You lose the animal or you lose the DART, sometimes both. Dr. Valderrama says simply, at the scale we now need, it is essentially impossible. Option 2, relocation. Transfer the animals to other zoos globally or return them to Africa. The problems are immediate and insurmountable. There are not enough zoo facilities in the world to absorb 200 large hippos. African wildlife conservation authorities have formally rejected the Colombian animals. Their genetic profile, after decades of isolated inbreeding, has no conservation value for African hippo populations. There is nowhere to send them. Option 3, controlled culling, a managed reduction of the population through targeted shooting. The recommendation of virtually every wildlife biologist, ecologist, and invasive species expert who has studied the situation in depth. A hippo named Pepa accumulates millions of TikTok followers. Elementary school children mail drawings to government offices. 3 separate culling programs are announced. 3 separate culling programs are canceled within days under the weight of public outrage. 2010, the situation will be addressed. 2015, a comprehensive study has been commissioned. 2020, the sterilization program has officially begun. 2024, the population has doubled since the program started. Dr. Patricia Medina, wildlife biologist, says what everyone in the scientific community is thinking. We are observing an ecological disaster developing in real time. The obstacle is not scientific knowledge. It is not funding alone. It is sentiment, and sentiment does not negotiate with biology. While scientists argue and governments delay, Hacienda Napoles itself has become something that nobody in 1993 could possibly have predicted. A theme park. The Colombian government opens Parque Temático Hacienda Napoles, part wildlife sanctuary, part water park, part museum, part, if we're being completely honest, narco-tourism destination. For $20, you walk the ground Pablo Escobar walked. You visit a museum that tells his story, carefully worded, acknowledging the violence, noting the thousands of people he killed, but somehow inevitably circling back to the spectacle, the excess, the animals, the legend. The gift shop sells cocaine hippo t-shirts in children's sizes. You can ride a water slide that runs directly over the old drug smuggling airstrip. You can pose for photographs with a full-scale replica of Pablo's first hippo. You can eat lunch in the shadow of his ruined mansion and take photographs of the walls. A local park guide explains it to a tourist group as carefully as he can. It is complicated. Pablo was a monster. He caused suffering that this region will never fully recover from. But he also built things. He gave employment to people who had absolutely nothing. Now the park gives employment again. The hippos, they did not choose any of this. They are simply animals trying to survive. At the entrance gate stands Pablo's first airplane, the Piper Cub, the aircraft that made the first cocaine run north, the plane that started everything. Now it's a backdrop for family holiday photographs. Some hippos live within the park's managed water features, fed on schedule, observed safely from viewing platforms, but the rest are out there on the Magdalena, on the tributaries and the Oxbow lakes and the flooded farmland. Beyond every fence, beyond every plan, beyond every budget and every government promise and every international conservation framework ever written. Pablo's legacy, roaming completely free. 30 years after Pablo Escobar died on that rooftop, his hippos are thriving. His zoo has become a jungle. His paradise has become a crisis. His monument to personal excess is still expanding into river systems, into farmland, into ecosystems that never evolved to contain it. Colombia inherited a disaster it never created. 4 animals brought here against every law of nature and geography are now actively rewriting the ecology of an entire continent's river system. Original hippos, 4. Current population, 130 to 200. Projected population by 2050, 1,000 plus. Territory covered, 5,000 plus square kilometers. Cost per sterilization, $50,000. Cost of total inaction? Unknown. Rising, accelerating. Pablo Escobar wanted immortality. He said it directly to journalists, to politicians, to anyone who would listen. He wanted to be remembered. He wanted a legacy so large, so permanent, so deeply embedded in the world that death itself couldn't erase it. He got exactly what he asked for. Not in bronze statues, not in government buildings or named streets or museum exhibits, not in the Netflix series or the documentaries written about him. In living, breathing, reproducing flesh, moving through the rivers of Colombia in the dark, unstoppable, unplanned, completely beyond anyone's control. The king of cocaine is dead for 30 years. His monsters outlived him, and they are nowhere close to finished. In 2022, a Colombian federal court granted hippopotamuses legal personhood, the first time wild animals in Colombia received such legal status in recorded history. The war over Pablo Escobar's living legacy continues. Nobody is winning.